So what do you want to talk about?
Okay, so I looked into like what you do. You're like you've talked a lot about like gun violence in adolescence and media, right?
Yeah,
So I wanted to ask you a few questions about that, if that's
sure,
okay. Also,
sure,
I'm recording. Is that okay?
sure.
Okay. Okay, so you're the first person I'm interviewing for my research. So I wanted to ask you like about some background information, like on like how long does the adolescent brain like grow to what age, and how does it absorb information from the people around and the media that surrounds teenagers?
Okay, so I'm one of the people that doesn't believe in the teenage brain as somehow defective or immature or age 25 suddenly the brain is ready for adulthood. I don't buy
Mhm,
into that. Um, it's like pop psychology. And
mm,
fortunately, people get funded to with that in mind. They get funded to study teenagers, and they get funded to do brain imaging on teenagers because people are interested. It's people are always
mhm.
interested in what teenagers are doing and thinking, and you've noticed that.
Yeah, that's true.
So the teenage brain is like a vacuum. It's a giant, it sucks in all the stuff going on because the teenage brain is trying to develop good decisions and an identity, um,
Mhm,
how to live one's life, who to live it with. These are important questions. And
mhm,
so the teenage brain is sort of designed to soak in all that information and then learn how to use it effectively for the individual. So there's nothing special about age 25 as far as I'm concerned. Nothing magical
mhm.
happens. You don't suddenly become an adult.
Yeah, you're not proof like perfect, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
people's brains change all through their lives. There's no
Mhm,
like special demarcation as far as I can tell. There's continuous change in how we develop, and
mhm.
teenagers are particularly likely to explore. That's what I talk about more. They're
Okay.
explore, they explore, and so when they explore, they can do things that are risky, and
Yeah.
then, you learn. That's why you do it. You learn. You
So
know,
because they're sucking in all of this information around them, it can be either really good or really bad, right? Like what
yeah,
they're absorbing. Yeah.
yeah. It depends on one's environment, one's family.
Mhm,
These are all very important factors. One's school
mhm.
you go to, what neighborhood you live in, what kind of media do you expose yourself to? All of those are going to be very, very influential. As we get older, we tend to get set in our ways,
Yeah.
and things don't influence us as much. So it's a special time in life. It's pretty interesting. I find it to be pretty interesting.
Mhm, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you by the way, if you see me looking this way, I'm looking at my phone for the notes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm listening to you, I swear.
No,
So
it's
so you would say like the development of like impulse control, decision making, planning, like all of that is for adolescents, it's more affected by their environment than an adult, right? Like you're obviously gonna take in more.
yeah, I would
Yeah.
say so. Now there are brain changes that happen, but a lot of when we talk about problems with adolescents in terms of risky behavior and maladaptive stuff, a lot of that is there before they're teenagers. So
Mhm.
teenagers that grow up in environments that are harmful are more susceptible to be impulsive,
Yeah.
um, things like that. And so it's not necessarily the teenage brain as much as what's happened to the brain before they were teenagers. That's a critical
That's
question.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's critical. And so the teenage brain gains some capabilities that it doesn't have, like working memory gets better. So you're more able to hold ideas in mind when you make decisions than when you're like an 8-year-old. An 8-year-old has a much more limited ability to think about different alternatives, how much information to use in making
Mhm.
decisions, whereas an 18-year-old has a lot more capability for that. So that is a brain change that's important, and there's
Right.
a lot of variability in that. Some kids develop early, others later. We're studying that now in terms of just a simple thing like driving, how to drive a car. The better
Mhm.
you work memory, the better you will be at taking in the information you need to use in order to drive safely. So that's an example where individual differences in brain development might actually matter,
Okay.
because yeah, you have more work. You know what working memory is? Sort of it's your brain's ability to hold information when you're
So
thinking. Yeah.
so that means that, like, teenagers are more susceptible to, like, problematic behavior, right? They're gonna
They're more susceptible to problematic behavior for lots of different reasons, one of which is
Mhm.
they're trying out new things. So, if they see their parents drinking alcohol, which you're probably not allowed to do in Dubai, um,
Mhm. Yeah.
you you're not going to have alcohol problems. But, if you see your parents drinking alcohol, you might want to try it and see what it's like.
Mhm.
If you see your friends using marijuana, you might want to try it. So there's that
Mhm.
risk of trying things that could be potentially harmful. And then there's the issue of, being impulsive, lacking
Yeah.
self-control, things like that. Those are individual differences. They're not necessarily um, associated with the teenage brain per se, because you can
Okay.
have an adult could have those issues. There are plenty of adults with impulse control problems and
Mhm.
inability to control themselves, become addicted, and therefore lose control over the addiction. Um, that's not unique to adolescents. People focus on adolescents because that's where they learn these things.
Mhm.
Typically, they
So we can't blame everything on teenagers, right?
no,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Mhm.
especially the whole idea of the teenage brain is somehow being, malformed or not ready, or it's ready in a lot of ways. A lot of teenagers are much more sensitive to the problems we have in the world than adults. Climate
Mhm.
change in the U.S., gun violence. A lot of teenagers are worried about that because they have to go to
Mhm.
schools where, like you said, where there's somebody could bring a gun, and start shooting at people. This,
Mhm.
that's the problem for teenagers because they live in the United States, which has very loose gun laws.
Yeah.
you know, that's a problem for the teenage brain because the teenage brain is stuck in a place with a lot of people willing
Mhm.
to use guns. The other thing I'm unhappy about with guns is the movie industry is just
Yeah.
out of control. I mean, guns everywhere, and that's
Mhm.
gotta had an influence. I mean, it just makes guns look like the default way to deal with problems.
Do you
Get your gun.
know do you know the show Euphoria by any chance?
I watched it once. I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." So I stopped watching. But yeah, I know you did a little piece on it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I did.
do they have guns in there too?
Everything, it's like it's horrendous. There's everything in there. And all like, the whole audience for Euphoria is teenagers, right? And it's so unrealistic because maybe, like, 10% of teenagers in the US are actually acting like that. So I wanted to ask you, like, the effect of people like me who are normal watching, like, adults acting in media, acting like teenagers doing drugs, and, like, there's so much violence in that show, and, like, I don't get what's the appeal, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think it's very
Mhm,
sensationalistic, and people will watch stuff like that. Like a
mhm,
lot of stuff on social media is as they say, clickable. People want to see it
mhm.
for it
Why
to
do you
be.
think that is? Why do people wanna see that type of stuff?
Uh, well, we've known for a long time that violence is a very uh, effective way to draw an audience.
Mhm.
Some of the most popular TV shows are about crime.
Yeah.
The longest running dramas on TV are all police and legal,
Mhm.
and some medical,
That's
but
true.
people like crime and violence. I find it intriguing. Um, Partly because it's interesting to see people deal with it and so
Mhm.
on, and it's exciting, and so it's got a lot of attributes that make it appealing. So Hollywood uses it a lot and uses guns way more than
Mhm.
the gun has become so ubiquitous. I just watched this series, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Have you heard about that
I've
with
heard of that.
Donald
Yeah.
Glover and yeah,
Mhm.
guns all the time. I mean, they're
Mhm.
assassins. They're the two of them are assassins in the story, so they're hired
Mhm.
by some unknown company to go and kill people. So they're using
Mhm.
guns all the time.
And
All
how does it affect teenagers who are watching all these guns? Like, are they prone to going and buying a gun when they're older?
I think what it does is it normalizes the
Mhm.
use of guns, and it probably makes it look like more people use guns than actually do.
Mhm.
So, just teenagers are learning about the world. If they watch a lot of this kind of uh, content in the movies and TV, they're going to learn that the world is filled with guns. And of
Yeah.
course, the US, it's much less of a problem like in a place like Dubai, because you're not going to have a lot of people running around with guns.
Mhm.
And in Europe either. So
Yeah.
in the US, it's a problem because
Mhm.
we have so many people with guns. And so if you see people using guns and there's other people who have them, my hypothesis is, especially in cities like where
Mhm.
I live outside of Philadelphia, we have a huge gun violence problem.
Mhm.
There's a gun death almost every day, literally.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Every day on the news, somebody got shot. All ages, going teenagers all the way up to people in their 40s, 50s, even really old people getting shot.
Mhm.
People are just using guns now to settle disputes and when they get upset in an argument, they pull out a gun. It's gotten out of control, and I don't. It's very difficult in this country, because you've lived here. You know what it's like.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem, the whole gun thing.
And the
So
media shouldn't be, like, showing these are actual problems, like, occurring. There's people being affected by it every day, and the
yeah,
media still I don't wanna say romanticizing, but it is. It's kind of like it makes it seem cool
I
on
agree.
media.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And it's less of a problem. People say, "Well, why is it not a problem overseas?" And the answer is because
Mhm.
people don't have guns.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It's still fun to watch, but you don't
Mhm.
have the sense that it's a local problem, or that people that are going to be using guns.
Mhm.
So, it's just entertainment from that perspective. Whereas
So
here, it's
mhm.
also normalizing, and we've done research on it. Parents are more willing to let their kids watch that kind of content if they think it's morally justifiable, which means if you use a gun for a good reason, like to protect your family or yourself, uh,
Mhm.
parents are much more open to letting their kids watch that. So
Mhm.
the violence is often very morally acceptable. The violence in Hollywood movies and television. The bad guys, of course, are the ones that also use guns, but then the good guys go after the bad guys. So
Mhm.
good guys, it glorifies the good guys.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So parents are saying that just for that, maybe that people like, our kids are gonna use guns as self-defense, that it's okay to see it in
Well,
media?
what we know is they are more willing to let their kids watch those kind of movies.
Mm.
Now, you can extrapolate from that the kids, if they watch more of those kind of movies, are going to feel like those guns are more acceptable. And if
Mhm.
they live in an environment like in Philadelphia, where there's a shooting almost every day, and you're a young person and you could get a gun if you needed it to protect
Mhm.
yourself, I think it all feeds into the same thing. It's a good idea to have a gun.
Mhm.
Especially if you live in an environment where there's a lot of shootings. to protect yourself, you
But
know?
that shouldn't even be a problem in the first place to even have to be protecting yourself, right? Yeah.
Right, right. And that's
Mhm.
because we have this crazy, Second Amendment, and we have a lot of people that live and die by the belief that you got to be able to have a gun. And
Mhm.
and the Second Amendment is ridiculous. I mean, it's so out of date. I mean,
Mhm.
there's no
It
reason
is.
that, yeah, it's just stupid. And because of our culture, we allow it to rule our lives. It's really sad in my mind.
So you would say, like, the American culture has, like, a negative effect kind of on adolescents, like, the constant like, the amendments were ma added in, like, the late 1700s, right?
Yeah.
After the America became free from the UK, and we're still applying it now, and it's more of a negative effect for teenagers and people my age, right?
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
so. I mean,
Mhm.
for a long time, the Second Amendment didn't really govern people thought it applied to having a militia, which is what
Mhm.
it says. And then all of a sudden we had a conservative Supreme Court due to they were, I think, catering to popular opinion within um, parts of the population that like guns. So they felt like, we should allow them to have guns.
Mhm.
It's fundamentally a I think a result of lack of trust of other people. We don't
Mhm.
trust other people very much. So you feel like you got to have a gun to protect yourself. Because if you really felt comfortable, you would allow the police or whatever to take care of the problem.
People
People
don't
don't,
trust the police, yeah,
no,
yeah.
no. So if you don't trust, the people that are supposed to keep us safe, the next best option is get a gun, take care of yourself with a gun. It's very sad.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Really.
yeah,
And I saw you did research on the show 13 Reasons Why
yeah,
and the
yeah.
violence behind all of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So the 13 Reasons Why series, you watched it, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
When I first saw it, I thought it was a little over the top. We did
Mhm.
a study on the second season, and we found that some kids really benefited from it. They felt much better.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Some kids, not so much. Some kids felt worse. Um, Depends on how suicidal someone is to begin with. So
Mhm.
it has a therapeutic benefit, and it potentially aggravates suicidal thoughts for some people.
Okay.
What we didn't like was that there's an advocacy group. There are lots of advocates in the U.S., and I'm one of them that says the media shouldn't portray suicide
Mhm.
unnecessarily, or make it easy to model. Don't
Mhm.
show people killing themselves. Don't show methods, things like that, because that leads to contagion.
Mhm.
Um, so that community immediately condemned the show and said, it's showing a young woman killing herself, and it's modeling it so people can imitate it, and they
Mhm.
condemned the show. So then we studied the second season. We found out, well, some people benefited, some people may not have, but they stopped watching. The people who didn't benefit just stopped after 2 or 3 episodes. They just didn't want to watch anymore.
Mhm.
So the people that benefited from it watched the whole thing. So if it's
Mhm.
really disturbing to watch, people stop.
But do
So we
people know sorry, do teenagers know if they're benefiting or not? That's my question. Like
Well, I think they do because they keep watching. They watch, they keep their eyes on the show. So
mm,
they're doing that for a reason. They find it engrossing in some way that's beneficial to them. If they think it's harmful, they stop. And we found that the kids who stop are the ones who have a bad reaction. So what we showed was there were no effects on suicide. There was no increase in suicide
okay.
associated with the show,
Mhm.
contrary to what a lot of people were saying based on just any evidence they could find. They immediately said, "Oh, the show's causing suicide." So we reanalyzed the data in different ways, and we found there's no evidence for a suicide effect.
Okay,
We,
good.
yeah, we did find some people were unhappy. I think as a result of the second season, we found some people were more prone to self-harm. And there's now a
Mhm.
study out that shows there was an increase in self-harm uh, due to people coming to hospitals after the show aired.
Really?
Yes, so there's an
Oh.
increase in self-harm. So then the question is, well, what is self-harm? And self-harm has a lot of
Mhm.
motivations, but one of the largest motivations is it's a call for help.
Yeah.
Because when you
Mhm.
do it, you're telling people, I am so upset with my life and my situation, and I'm willing to cut myself or do stuff to myself or take a drug. It's a cry for help. So the
Mhm.
show, in a lot of ways, when it had that effect, is really saying it provoked the kids who were upset by it to, you know, move to self-harm as a reaction, to sort
Mhm.
of say, this isn't. I think the show portrays what can happen to some kids in toxic high school environments.
Mhm.
It's telling that story. So if you feel, for someone watching it who has experienced that, that could be pretty upsetting. On the other hand, some people found it that, I I think some people who watch things like that say, "Oh, I can get through that." You know,
Mhm.
she couldn't, but I can.
Mhm. But then
So
there's people who are so you're saying, like, the people who live in a situation similar to the show, kind of they relate to it, and it falls like, it increases their depression almost, makes them
for,
fall even deeper in.
for some, yes, I think it
Okay.
did do that for some people, and for some
Mhm.
people, it was helpful. And then the producers removed the suicide scene from the
Mhm.
last episode. They took it off, which was a good idea because there's no point in having it. They don't need it. You just
I
tell
didn't
you.
know they did that.
Yeah, they did that after the first season. Um, it may have done it during the first season. There was a huge outcry about the show,
Mhm.
and they responded to that by putting up, messages about how to get help and stuff like that. But
Okay.
that's a problem in general for a lot of stuff that adolescents watch. There should be more resources for those people. If it's troubling to watch. Just for
Mhm.
adults too, like nowadays here in the US, we have the helplines and we publicize that all the time, the new 988 number. There used to be a phone number. So that's been a cultural change in the US.
Do you think people actually go towards those helplines and they use them?
They do. There's some
Mhm.
concern that if you do use it, that they're going to call the police and come to your home.
Mhm.
There's some concern about that, but yeah, I think there is use of it. And
Okay.
there have been crisis lines that one could go online and talk to a counselor. And there was an increase in that after the show. There was use of crisis lines. For people
I
who are.
believe I
Hmm?
believe Euphoria has, at the very beginning before an episode shows, I think Euphoria does flash, like, a helpline before
Yeah,
the episode starts. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's become common now because
Mhm.
people, the people who produce this don't want to be accused of creating problems. But
But the question is, like, why are we should we be showing shows where you have to flash a helpline to a kid? Like,
it's a good question.
yeah.
It's entertainment is very, very tricky because it can
Mhm.
be therapeutic and it can be harmful, and we don't understand what makes it one way or the other. We really don't. You know,
Mhm.
that's part of the problem. We know what'll get attention. We know how to draw Hollywood knows how to draw an audience. It doesn't know how to draw an audience in a way that's therapeutic versus not.
Mhm.
That's beyond its interest. All it cares about,
Yeah.
like
Is
social media.
money.
Yeah, it just wants clicks. It doesn't care if it's harmful or not.
Mhm.
That's the problem with our whole media environment. It's audience size and attention that drives it because it's driven by
Mhm.
advertising and so forth, and sales, ticket sales. So yeah, that's a huge problem.
I
And
don't know
they
if you read the sorry, I don't know if you read the Euphoria blog that I wrote, but the whole show, it's about drugs and the main character has a drug addiction, right? But when you go on TikTok, it's all like these people are trying to dress like all of the characters. They made it a whole trend, like a euphoria trend. And I don't know, it's like people are inspiring to look like Zendaya or the other like Jacob Elordi is another guy who plays. Do you know who that is? The actor?
I've heard of him. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He's one of the main male characters.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, so there's
So,
yeah.
yeah, it's like TikTok is kind of like it's romanticizing. Again, I'm using that word. Like it's glamorizing what the show is. The whole show, like Zendaya has spoken out about the show. She said like we try to do it to raise awareness about substance addiction, but people on TikTok kind of ignored that, right? And they made it like I want to be her. Like why do you want to be her, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to have different reactions, and it gets you to the problem of, are there going to be adolescents who find it alluring and, that this is cool,
Mhm.
I don't think most do, but there will be some who will, and unfortunately, it'll have an influence on them. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no,
So do you think
no.
sorry, you can go.
No, I just said I saw your little piece on Euphoria, and I sort of resonated to it. I think you're right.
Mhm.
It's unfortunate that there's some people following it in that way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you would say that even though it is a problem, there are teenagers who recognize like that it's not a good thing and
Oh
they
yeah,
learn from it instead of becoming it, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, there's a lot of moral panic about shows like that, but
Mhm.
got to realize that there are going to be people who are going to be adversely influenced just because you got fancy movie stars, portraying these things. That's,
Yeah.
you know, it's
That's
inevitable.
another thing I wanted to ask you about. Um, do you think like the attractiveness of these like celebrities or like the popularity, does it make it more like appealing to teenagers? Like if someone who nobody knew, if it was a show where no one knew any of the actors, like would it be as appealing?
I don't know the answer for sure, but I would guess that, knowing who these people are
Mhm.
as personalities and stars, so to speak, adds to the
Mhm.
glamour for sure. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I mean,
'Cause all of
it would be worth
sorry.
studying. Someone should study it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to find a professor who like studied exactly that, like how attractive an actor is, like to teenagers, does that make them more like susceptible to doing what the actor does in a
Yeah,
movie or show?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think who's done anything with that. Um, I mean, a lot of the research was done with that looked at this kind of influence was done with smoking, uh,
Mhm,
because the movies portrayed a lot of smoking, and the movie industry cut back on that, which was one of the success stories of
mhm,
research on modeling harmful behavior, because everyone agrees smoking's bad for you. Not everybody might agree
mhm.
with you about gun use. Um, I would think everyone would agree about drug use, but
Yeah,
apparently there hasn't been an uproar about that. There should be,
mhm,
like with shows like Euphoria. Is it glamorizing drug use?
mhm. Like, and I wanted to ask you, you know how there's a really big vaping issue right now with like all over in Dubai too.
Oh yeah,
Everyone I know in my school has like a vaping problem.
really?
And yeah. And do you think like I don't know like but a lot of people like I think a lot of media depicts teenagers negatively. There's not a lot of shows that like make teenagers come off as like good, like positive people. Like in a
Mm,
lot of the shows right now that are trending,
mhm.
teenagers are vaping, they're doing drugs and all of that. So would you say like media is almost like making us look bad?
Oh yeah, oh for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm,
I mean, teenagers are stereotyped as having the teenage brain. Like they're
mhm,
out of control, can't control themselves, doing stupid things.
Mhm.
And, you know, so they portray that, and adults like to look at that um, because it fits the stereotype of
Mhm.
the adolescent. Um, you know, we had I was part of a group that did a thing about the storm and stress hypothesis. That
Mhm.
tr- Going back to like the early 1900s, one of the first books written about adolescence talked about the storm and stress of being an adolescent, because the adolescent was seen as emotional and doing risky things and being out of control and
Mhm.
problem for parents. So it was like a storm and stress perspective on teenagers, and that's been around forever.
What
Even
does
before,
that mean? The storm and stress, like
means that adolescents are doing a lot of things that cause storm and stress for parents.
oh, okay. Mhm. I
Yeah,
don't
so
agree with that
you,
personally.
yeah, yeah, sure. Of course you
Mm.
don't. But that's one of the stereotypes. You know,
Mhm.
adolescents are emotional and they don't reason. They're impulsive. They use drugs. They have unprotected sex. They drive
Mhm.
badly. You know, all these things all fall into that stereotype. And Hollywood
Mhm.
plays on, no question, Hollywood plays on that. You don't see a lot of Hollywood shows about valiant adolescents.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's been a stereotype that's, like,
oh,
been
it's
around for a long time.
oh,
Yeah.
forever. You can read
Mhm.
Aristotle. Aristotle doesn't go into great depth about it, but he talks about adolescence as being emotional, more
Mhm.
guided by emotion. So yeah, this is an old idea. Shakespeare talks about it. I mean,
Romeo and Juliet.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's ingrained in our. It's the adult view of the teenager, because the
Mhm.
teenager is becoming independent, and parents have to let go, and they have trouble with that, and then they see the adolescent doing things that worries them, and yeah, it's a natural reaction among adults in a lot of ways, of
So
losing.
then I totally agree with where you're coming from because, like, my parents also, like, whenever I bring up college to them and because 'cause I'm 17, I'm, like, leaving soon. Whenever
Mhm.
I bring up college to them, they're, like, bringing up excuses. "You're gonna be surrounded by people with alcohol and drugs back in the US because I have to go back soon, right?" They're making up excuses for me to stay here, but, like, I
Oh yeah.
can't.
Oh,
Yeah.
you can't go to the university there. There's no good universities.
Compared to the US, no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
where do you want to go?
Um, Preferably back to California. I miss it. Yeah. No
Yeah.
offense to Pennsylvania, but
No, no, no. I love
yeah,
California. I
yeah.
think it's great. If I could live there, I would live there.
Mhm. You should. SoCal though, not North Cal, SoCal.
South. I
Yeah.
agree. I would live near LA. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I like LA. I know it has a bad reputation, um, but I've been there several times. I like it. I like the beaches. I like the vibe. The food is great. It's
It is,
nice.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just a nice place.
Mhm.
So yeah, you could go to UCLA or you could go to USC.
I'm hoping. Yeah,
Yeah, good. I hope you get in. Yeah.
thank you. Okay, can I ask you about, so going back to the media part, do you know why, like, how come things that are wholesome don't go viral? Like, everything that's trending now is, like, the opposite of wholesome, it's just negative. How come?
I think it's
Like
it's the same idea that negative stuff is just people are more interested in watching it because the
mhm,
positive is sort of the norm. People getting along,
mhm,
having happy lives.
and that's
Um,
boring.
yeah, it's not. It's typical, and so it's always been true that like the news media and the entertainment industry likes to show things that are different and outside of the norm because that's more interesting to watch. I mean,
Mhm,
natural attention what draws attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an old rule, and the media use it because the media are a business, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the way business works. You do whatever gets you the audience, or if you need to know, if you need to sell tickets, you do what sells tickets. If you need to get advertising, you do what draws viewers. You know,
Mm-hmm.
basically, I think it's all driven by, in a lot of ways, the profit motive, and people's natural tendencies to want to watch stuff that's different.
And do you know, by any chance, do you know who Andrew Tate is? Have you heard of him?
Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Uh, no, who is he?
He's an influencer who basically he's a YouTuber, and he kind of like encourages, if you search up his content, he encourages like young boys to treat women like trash kind of, and
Hmm,
like he's that whole like alpha stereotype, like go to the gym every day, um like ignore your parents,
hmm.
like that whole like, I don't know if you know what I'm
The
talking about, but
rebellious teen.
yeah, rebellious teen, but like directed towards boys that are young.
Yeah,
So
well,
that's like
that's not
mhm,
good.
not good.
No, no. But who's going to really follow that? I don't know.
Everyone.
He's got a lot of followers.
I know like most of the guys at my school follow him on Instagram, and they're all like they share his TikToks. They talk about him like he's like the new Jesus.
But are they really doing what he says?
They're trying to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well,
sad.
they're going to run into problems. If
Mhm,
they do that,
mhm.
so they'll learn.
I recommend you search him up. It's
I
really
will.
interesting. Yeah,
Edward Tate. Okay.
Andrew Tate.
Sorry. Yeah. Let me write his name down. He's on YouTube.
He's on YouTube, yeah.
How old is he?
I think he's 28.
Oh, so he's not that young.
Yeah, he's not that young.
Okay. How long has he been out there?
I think he's been trending for the past 3 years, I would say.
And what kind of stuff does he sell? Does he sell things? Does he push certain things?
I'm sure he sells his own like guides online, something like that.
Hmm.
But he's
Okay.
on YouTube, he's on TikTok, he's like on all social media platforms.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. I'll
So
look him up.
I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you, like overall social media, like do you know any like specifics on like how much teenagers absorb from social media itself, like Instagram, TikTok, excluding like shows and media, that type of media?
You mean how influential is social media?
Mhm,
Well, it's got to be influential. You got all these influencers. You've
mhm,
got so much promotion out
mhm,
there. Um, it's got to be. I mean, we know in tobacco, for example, I do some work in tobacco, and
mhm,
there's there's a lot of research goes into tobacco prevention, so we know more about that. But there's
mhm,
definitely promotion on social media that encourages vaping, um, smokeless tobacco, things like
mhm.
that. There's a lot on alcohol. So yeah, it's
Is it
having
effective?
yeah,
Do you think
oh
they
yeah,
are? Okay.
oh yeah, yeah. Now, when you say effective, that means that um, you can put an influencer out there who will get people to do things. Now,
Mhm,
over and above what they would have done without those influencers. But
mhm,
it might not be a huge effect, but cumulatively over lots of different influencers and lots of different occasions you might be on social media, it probably adds up. The vaping thing um, just took off because Juul was on Instagram. Juul,
really?
Juul advertised on
Mhm,
Instagram like crazy, and
mhm,
next thing you know, you've got 30-40% of kids using Juul product.
mhm.
It was driven almost completely by social media.
Do you know how schools are responding to vaping because my school, like, in Dubai, like, they basically force you, like, if you don't step up and admit that you're vaping, like, we're gonna put you in, like, in big trouble, and they don't really offer guidance to, like, help them, like, um, and that's, like, I know that's a lot of problems in a lot of public schools in America. They're like, you come forward if you're like, "We're gonna catch you." They kind of, like, threaten you with vaping, and a lot of people don't know, like, who to come forward to. They don't have anyone to trust to come forward with vaping, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's
Mhm,
this, in the US, there's a testing thing going on where a lot of schools are testing people for drug use. I don't
mhm,
know if they can detect vaping because tobacco is not that easy mostly they try to detect marijuana and some other drugs, opioids. But
mhm,
yeah, the whole, schools don't do well with drug use because they want to
mhm,
throw the kids out of school or prevent them from being in extracurricular activities. It's a totally, punishment oriented thing, which doesn't
mhm.
work because then the kids don't want to come out, like you said.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you want kids to learn that vaping is bad and to help them, potentially get over a vaping addiction, they have to feel comfortable coming forward about it.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
so schools are not very good at it. They either use testing to try to catch people,
mhm,
so they can't do extracurriculars, which is dumb because extracurriculars are healthy and adaptive for kids. They learn things. It's good for them.
So
Um,
instead of giving them options for things to, like, find new hobbies, replace it, like, they're kind of just, like,
Yeah,
shooting them out.
there's so many things that are more beneficial than
Mhm,
using a drug, and if
mhm,
they can encourage that, then kids are not going to be spending time using drugs. They're going to be
mhm,
playing sports, being in the drama club, or whatever the
mhm,
activity is, music.
mhm,
Should be encouraging that and not telling people if you use a drug you can't do those things.
mhm.
And then using testing, because when they do testing, then kids figure out, well, what's the drug that they're not going to catch me with?
Yeah. They find ways around it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So it's a hopeless thing to try that, and we've written about it and said doesn't pay to do it. It's not effective,
Mhm,
and some parents have picked up on that and have complained to their schools about it. Um,
mhm,
Still being done. I don't know what the latest percentages are, but it's a hefty percent are doing
mhm.
testing.
And
Unfortunately,
what about regarding, like, gun violence? How are schools, like, responding to that?
not very well. Uh,
Mhm,
Clearly you're not allowed to bring a gun
mhm,
to school, but kids do, and we have a lot of unfortunate stories about that. But yeah, I don't think they're doing much about it. They're not telling kids. What they should be doing is telling kids that if they have a gun at home, if there's a gun at home, they should tell their
mhm,
parents to put it away,
mhm,
safe storage, uh,
mhm,
because that way, at least in that household, there won't be the ability to access the gun.
mhm,
And the problem with that strategy is, well, if a kid really wants to use the gun, they're not going to want it to be hidden. They're going to want to get the gun. So, but at least
mhm,
schools ought to be educating kids about that and their families, that if you have a gun, you should store it unloaded
mhm,
where you can't easily get it. Um, it's still not a very good. I mean, the real problem is that people think guns are good. They're useful. They're good for
mhm,
self-defense. They'll protect you. Blah blah blah. That's the real
mhm.
problem, and people are buying guns like crazy, and so a lot of households have guns now.
And that's 'cause of media too, right?
The media
Yeah.
has promoted that. It's always
Mhm.
promoted guns.